Okay, so here is the thermostat. This is the original thermostat housing. What I did not understand is when you have the thermostat actually in, it will help direct the flow into two separate areas. One going back to the outlets that go back to the radiator, and then that top one goes back to the pump. So it'll pump it through go back into the engine. The problem with not having a thermostat is it just doesn't direct the water correctly. So you always have to have a thermostat in. So I believe that I did a lot more than I had to. I think I should have just changed the thermostat and all would have been fine. I was thinking this was just a simple housing where we only had one channel. Never really looked at it close enough. But as you see, there's actually two channels. So that top one goes back into the engine. This bottom one connects on to the outflow from here, from that here. Those are your two outflows from each side of the engine. So it's just going back into that outflow. So if you're going to run this engine, you got to have a thermostat in it. If you don't have a thermostat, it's just going to overheat. So kind of counterintuitive. You think there's no thermostat, it's just never going to get up to temperature, but that's not the case. Hope this helps somebody. So second project for the LR3, getting a little overheating. The instrument gauge doesn't show it, but I put a separate instrument gauge. The Nanocom will actually read the coolant temperature, and it's getting a little warmer than normal from what people say on the forums. So a little concerned. So I have taken apart the thermostat and taken it out. So the question is, driving it around, this hose came off a couple weeks ago doing a little test drive just around the neighborhood. So why did it come off? Was it just barely on there and someone didn't put the hose clamp on there very well? There's plenty of room now for margin on the clamp, but why did that come off? Was it overpressured? Because maybe this wasn't opening up? I don't know. I've put coolant in it back twice, done small test drives, but it gets a little hot. So the reason the fan shroud cover is I dropped one of the pieces of the thermostat down there, so I had to fish it out of there. But I'm gonna put everything back and let's go for a test drive, see what happens. Okay, so here we are. To recap, the engine's running hot. I've really only driven around the neighborhood and I've watched the temperature gauge, it seemed fine. And then one day, this hose came off, the hose going from the engine into the radiator. So why did it come off? I don't know. So I put an external temperature gauge on it and noticed it was getting a little warm. So from the factory, if it's just getting a little warm, it's not going to go into the red. But so I kept on shutting it down. So what I've done now is I've unhooked where the heater core is in. So I ran the heat, got the engine up, but heat was not coming out of the heating vents. So we are going to run some distilled water using gravity and see what happens. I've got two heater cores, so I've got the back lines pinched off with some clamps, and we're going to see what comes out this right here. If nothing comes out, we're going to probably hook up a hose to it. Figure it's basically all I can do right now. We're going to use gravity first and see how that goes. All right, nothing but green. I did it about 3/4 of the way of the gallon. Distilled water started coming out. There for a while, it wasn't flowing very well. But I think it's all right. I'm going to switch the clamps in the back and do the other heater core. So I just got done doing the other heater core. Green came out all the way until water, pure water. I don't think so. I think they're flowing fine. I think the heater cores are fine. All right, so to review, I have flushed all the lines that go to the heater cores, the back one and the one underneath the dash. I flushed everything, all this line, every line here. I actually replaced this with the correct T. No blockage. Running all new coolant into the radiator and out of this tube. It's clean water. So we're gonna start with replacing the water pump. Hey, so I've got the water pump, the housing about to come out. You do have to take the throttle body off, and then you got to take this mounting part that the throttle body sits on, bolts onto the intake. You have to take this off that side. It's a little bit of a spaghetti here, and just knowing the exact, putting it back, in the right order. But I was able to. There was another video on YouTube where the guy comes down from here, and then he's got a swivel. You can go straight. Just remove because I have the fan removed. I was able to go straight with a 8mm bolt extension to get this one. So you can go straight from here to get that one and this one. So I got this piece that holds on the throttle body. I was able to use one of these flexible 1/2" extensions, and that gave me, I could get underneath here and then go through there to get to the bolts. It gave me the right angle, so that's what I used. Okay, so I've got the new pump on. I think the torque settings is 7 pounds. I don't think my torque wrench would even be that accurate, so I just use a 1/4 inch drive and just try not to over tighten, and try to use some common sense when tighten it down good and tight, but don't act like a gorilla. And I think it's on there all right. I did take off the secondary belt tensioner just to make it easier to put this new belt on. I got new belts, figured might as well. So I'm gonna put both belts on now. Okay, so I got the primary belt on. I gotta say, it's a pretty tight fit. I mean, it's on there very tight. So hopefully that helps with my issue. Okay, so here we go. Back to the fun. The radiator came in, the new one, so we're gonna install that. Taking off the front shroud, the air stuff right here just to give us more room. Taking off the front steam line, and I just took out the bottom shroud. It's just hold on by 2 little clips, one here, one here. Just unclip those. See if I can see that right here, and it just pulls right on out. So now we got a 13mm bolt down here. Apparently, we gotta find that, and some 8s and some 8s up here, and get this thing installed. Okay, so I've got these out. These slide up. There's a little pin, you push it on the side. They slide out. I got the 8mm here. The 8mm going this way. The 8mm going this way. Power steering lines just kind of unclip over here, and we're about to take off the transmission lines. Okay, so I took off the transmission lines. What I did is I put bolts and then retighten the clamps, and that keeps the transmission fluid from coming out from the hose. From the bottom one, I would say maybe half a quart came out, not too much. Anyway, about a half a quart, so there you go. Okay, so I made a little mod. I actually drilled a hole through here. It's not big enough for the socket, but then you can connect it once you get this extension through. The problem is even with the universal joint, you might be able to get it undone, that bolt that I'm getting right now. But I don't think there's any way to get it back to do the install. So I think this is gonna be a lot easier. And it's a little dark, but there's a lot of trash piled up. That's really bad right there. I don't know how much at the bottom probably makes a difference. I don't know, but got it free. We're taking it out now. Okay, so next day I'm back at it. I'm gonna take a shop vac and clean out all the debris. This is the old radiator. So as you see, lots of debris down there. So I'm going to clean it all out before we install the new one, right? So I got the radiator in. Tight fit, a little difficult, but I got it. Two bottom tabs kind of hug the bottom rate to the condenser, then the top is a couple bolts. And don't forget to take the drain plug off the old radiator, because the new one didn't come with one. And the new one, this isn't really correct. The little tabs won't go in there, so I'm going to have to kind of do a little engineering there, make it right with some zip ties. Alright, so correction. The drain plug, it wouldn't fit in there, and this is a aftermarket radiator. It's not an original Land Rover. So I put some distilled water down here, and only water came out the this end of the radiator. It didn't come out there. It's not wet at all, so I'm going to assume they designed it without the use of this, since they didn't include a plug. But you do have to take this off the old radiator, put it on there. Not too bad. Alright, so I got the radiator all in, secured, not hooked up, but review, there's a 13 millimeter here, 13 millimeter here. You've got this right here, this right here. You just push in with the little tabs and then pull these little plastic things up. You've got a small 8 millimeter here, a small 8 millimeter here, a small 8 millimeter here that just holds on the air conditioning lines. And then you've got an 8 millimeter here. You have to kind of get this loose. And then there's an 8 millimeter behind here. Again, I drilled a hole. It made taking that screw out that's back in there so much easier. And then you got a little plastic thing to secure this down. Okay, so I've got the the transmission lines in. I actually had to take both of them off and just inflow through the top one, and then just as soon as when the flow started going pretty good out of the bottom one, I put the hoses on. Without that, there just wasn't any way to get the air out. So the water, the transmission fluid wouldn't go in. Anyway, got that done. Well, I'm happy to say the engine is running correctly. I think it was a thermostat. Unfortunately, I think it was the thermostat all along. When I got the overheating issue, I removed the thermostat thinking that you could run this engine without it, and it just wouldn't get up to temperature, but that was not the case. I removed the thermostat, so it was still overheating, replaced the water pump, still overheating, flushed all the lines, still overheating, replaced the radiator, still overheating, and then when I put the new thermostat back in, everything works as it should. So I've taken it on multiple test drives. It's hanging out in the 190s. Exactly, I think it's great. I've always heard these engines run between 205 and 212 or so. Now I haven't taken on a highway yet, but it's running just around the neighborhood in the 190s. So it's holding still. I've kind of mounted this temperature gauge just to kind of keep an eye on it, and very happy. So I think we'll move on to the next project. Okay, so what you're going to see in this video is me learning the 4.4 V8 has to have a thermostat in it. I was doing a test drive in my neighborhood with the new LR3 4.4 V8, and the upper radiator hose came off, and I was wondering why it did that. Did it overpressurize, or was it just slipped off? So I took out the thermostat and tried to run it without that, but the engine would heat up, and I put a external monitor on it, monitoring the temperature. So I thought you could just run it without a thermostat, but you can't. I replaced the pump. I flushed all the lines. I replaced the water pump. Then I replaced the actual thermostat, but I put the new one in without the thermostat in it. And then I replaced the radiator, and then I put the new thermostat into the new housing, and everything worked fine. So this is my series of steps how I learned all this.